Okay, I think everybody's here. You are very welcome to this workshop about e-health and continence and incontinence, of course. My name is Eva Samuelsson, and I'm general practitioner from Sweden and also professor in family medicine at Umeå University. And then we have Marco. Could you present yourself?
Yeah, my name is Marco Blanker. I'm a general practitioner from the Netherlands and a researcher at the Department of General Practice and Elderly Care Medicine of Groningen University.
And my name is Eva Nyström. I also belong to the Department of Public Health and Clinical Medicine in Umeå as Eva, and I'm training to be a general practitioner as well.
Okay, I will introduce this workshop, and I hope you have made the quiz here. Heidi Brown is also participating in this workshop, but she's pregnant in week 36. She's a urogynecologist from Wisconsin University in the US, and she has made a video presentation, so we'll see her on video, and that's very good for an e-health workshop, I think. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Here is a picture of her, photo of her. And these are my disclosures. We have some slightly changes in the schedule. We start with Marco, and then you see the video, and then Emma, and then we have discussion in small groups. But first, I would like to know, have you all answered the questions in the quiz? Just see what we get here. Have you posted your... it changes. Well, what do we see? Well, it's quite a broad perspective on this workshop, as you can see, and there are lots of thoughts, maybe feelings, mostly positive, I think. We'll see later in the discussion we can share some of these thoughts. I think we continue with the next one. A bit. 19% of you have never recommended the internet or apps for patients with incontinence. Do we have any technicians here? No? Or how many of you work with patients? Oh, not everybody, so we have some other persons also. But we can see here that most people have experiences from different kinds of e-health when it comes to patients. So this question is just some kind of warming up, because we used exactly the same question in a workshop in Tokyo in 2016, and that was 3 years ago, and you can see then 41% of the delegates had no experience from e-health. So a bit difference, and I wouldn't say that we are representative of the general population, but I think this mirrors what has happened in the world since 2016. Now, in 2019, the second quarter of 2019, more than half of the world's population have access to the internet. And in some countries, it's over 95%, like in Northern Europe and Northern America, for example. And concerning smartphones, more than 1/3 of the world's population owns a smartphone. And in some countries, I think UK is the leader here, more than 80% own a smartphone. And what has happened since 2016, mHealth apps has become very popular, and the yearly download now in 2017 was 3.7 billion health apps. And the time from developing an app to presenting research results to implement it is quite long, and few are evidence-based of these health apps. What can we say more? Well, WHO has a goal of universal health coverage in 2030, and they say that this cannot be achieved without e-health. But the digital divide is not just about access to internet, smartphones, broadband, things like that. It is much more complicated than that, and we will hear something about this during this session. Things like educational level, literacy, health literacy, economy, equality, democracy are important things. We'll discuss that later. Well, as you saw, there are lots of health apps coming, and this is a very, very, very large, big market. And what do we know about content, security, usability, and effectiveness? I mean, as when we're working in the healthcare, most of us, and which app shall we recommend, which internet program, and so on. In Europe, we have a sort of risk classification, and it's the same in the US and other countries, that we classify medical devices according to the risk for the patient. And briefly, you can say that if an app or an internet program contains some sort of calculating function, some sort of assessment or measuring in order to put a diagnosis or to recommend treatment, then it's classified as a higher risk than class 1. But for the apps, for example, that we have developed in the e-continence group, which I represent together with Emma, it's class 1 device, no calculations that could interfere with the treatment. Okay, so this is one, the CE mark is one sort of quality mark for an app. We have in US the FDA, and I went through the FDA approvals before this session, but I didn't find any device or app or internet program for incontinence that was approved. In the UK, we have the NHS, National Health Service apps library. And in that library, we have the Squeezy app, which is very often used. But as far as I know, it's not yet evaluated scientifically, but it has a very long experience from users. Efforts are also made to score apps in a scientific way based on included features, functionality, and accuracy. And in this article, 32 apps were evaluated according to one of these scores. And I think it was the Kegel trainer that got the highest scores, but there were many apps up in the highest levels. And if you would like to listen to another presentation about scoring apps with another score system, there is an abstract 547 about this. But scoring is quite difficult because apps are a very dynamic thing. You have to constantly update apps, you have to constantly update internet programs, so it changes all the time. Okay, very short. What do we know about the effectiveness of self-management and treatment with apps and internet? Very recently, a systematic scoping review was published by Stephanie Bernard, co-authors from Canada. What is a scoping review then? Well, a scoping review is based on a very strict protocol with aims, selection, criteria, and methodology defined before the review starts. But it has a broader approach than a systematic review, also aiming to identify knowledge gaps. So in this review, studies regarding urinary incontinence, mobile technology, some sort of outcome measure, and published after 1999 were scrutinized. And of 908 records, 12 were included. Of these, there were 3 RCTs, and 2 of these were from our group, the TET Internet and the TET App, and there was also a telerehabilitation device that was evaluated. Included persons were mostly women in 11 out of 12 studies, mostly middle-aged, and mainly stress urinary incontinence. And the authors looked at features such as data extraction, educational level, presence of reminders, possibility to interact with social media, self-monitoring, and so on. And what did they say about the effectiveness? Well, the conclusion from these authors were that there is level 2 evidence for improvement in urinary incontinence, for satisfaction with treatment, for higher adherence, and for cost effectiveness. And why is it not level 1? Because we have not yet published any studies with an active control group contra the intervention. But if you attend this Congress and listen to the abstracts presented, this may be changed in a few years, I think. The authors also discussed problems with the app treatment, mobile technologies for self-management. And one important thing is that all these studies are made with educated women from high-income countries. And we'll discuss that later. But one important thing and one interesting thing, I think, is that they also discuss, we used to recommend, for example, for pelvic floor muscle training, 12 weeks duration, and to train each day at least 3 times. And this is not based on a very scientific basis. So perhaps it's enough with 3 PFMT sessions per week. The authors also suggested more built-in features, such as, for example, possibility to interact with social media. But I don't know of any studies where it has been shown that this actually improves the incontinence. Okay, so what do we know about the caregivers' expectations? We will hear a presentation from Marco about that. Here's another also from the Netherlands, an interview with general practitioners. They had mixed feelings about being the supportive person regarding e-health for the patient. And I think we'll hear more about that from Marco. And what about the users? Here are 2 studies based on interviews. One from the Netherlands, and this was interviews with patients from general practice that were potential users. They had went through treatment in the general practice, but they still had stress urinary incontinence, and the majority of them were older than 60 years. And they talked about the need to meet. They wanted actually to meet a person in the practice, but also they talked about e-health as a tool to bridge obstacles. And the other article is from Sweden. It's Ina Asklund sitting there, who have interviewed women participating in our app RCT. Majority were middle-aged, and the core category found in this article was that the app enabling my independence. They found the app being something new, kept the motivation up, but also they always reflected about, am I good enough? Could I be better? So I think I'll end there with this short introduction, and I give the word to you, Marco.